Welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Aaron Fenick.
G'day.
How's it going, Aaron?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Been talking about different guitars. You make guitars here on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I do.
That's an amazing thing.
It is, yeah.
What got you started building guitars?
Curiosity, mainly, it's probably, and having an overactive brain. Started playing guitar. I was probably late, actually, to music. Probably started playing in my early 20s. And at the time I was going to university and doing things and I've always loved music.
What did you do at university?
I studied science.
Okay.
So I sort of did a mixed degree of, I came from a trade background when I left school. So I did that thing. And I think we had this chat off camera. It was, finish school and go and do a trade, which was fantastic. But I sort of did that for a number of years. So I did spray painting of all things.
Well, I guess that comes in handy when you're spraying guitars.
It does, yeah. So I did spray painting, which taught me a lot about, finishing and probably developed that, perfectionism, I suppose, because everything has to be right. Surface preparation has to be absolutely perfect. Never really liked cars though. It was sort of lost on me, the whole thing.
So spray painting was about painting cars?
It's about painting cars, yeah. I loved the sort of artistic side of getting something absolutely beautiful and perfect and, taking someone's, pride and joy and all these beautiful old cars. But personally for me, I wasn't really a car person. But it was, like we talked about before, it was one of those things. Doing a trade was a necessity. Had a lot of mates at the same time that were doing carpentry as well. And I thought, this looks pretty good. So any chance I got, I'd go and work with them and finished my first apprenticeship and then went and did carpentry.
Oh, wow.
So I sort of, at the same time...
So you're developing lots of skills that would hopefully pay off down the track.
Look, I don't know if it's any different for anybody else, but certainly for me leaving school, I didn't really quite know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of finding... But I knew that I loved working with my hands, always very curious, always asking questions, would never sort of shy away from making anything. I made just about everything I interacted with. Which was both a blessing and a curse. So I did carpentry, and then sort of at the time I'd met my wife, who was my wife now, and she sort of said, have you ever thought about going to university? And I was like, well, yeah, I would love to. I was really good at mathematics and science at school, never really got a chance to sort of go into that pathway. So I applied and got in. And I actually applied in two locations. I applied on the Gold Coast because I was living here. So born and bred in North Queensland, moved to the Gold Coast in 97, I think. Mm-hmm. And then applied to get in locally. I applied for, I can't remember what it was, some science course at Griffith University. But my wife is from WA and I applied over there for it was a mixed degree, sort of looking at oceanography, material science and engineering, a lot of maths, a lot of physics. And it just really appealed to me to move to a location in Australia I'd never been to. And then just to dedicate myself back to sort of learning again.
I guess if you're in move to a different place, it frees you from some of the distractions that you would have had.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because I think if I had have stayed locally in the sort of, even in the same sort of friend circle, all my great mates still to this day, but sort of cutting everything off sort of almost gave me that freedom to go, right, I'm going to really focus and hone in over there. I thought I'll just stay 3 years, ended up staying 10. Got into music through that process, and it just so happened that what I studied was all, wave mechanics and ocean physics. Frequency, whether you're measuring it in air or in water, or on a surface for that matter. So I sort of started to go, I'm curious now about playing guitars. I was, started writing songs, and then I sort of went, what makes these things work? And then I bought a guitar, cut it in half just to have a look at what was on the inside, because this was all where you could just
I mean,
tap anything.
not many people would spend the money on buying a guitar and then cut it in half.
No, well, look, I played it for a while. It was just a really shitty guitar. So I thought, but what are all these things inside? What are all these braces? Why are these frets in this position? So these are the things that were churning through my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that there? Why is it, a neck put on that way? Why does that guitar look different to that guitar? And why does my friend's guitar sound different to mine? And so while everyone was playing them, I'm kind of thinking of these things. And then we moved back to Queensland in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And at that stage, I started to get really curious and sort of going, all right, I'm going to build a little space at home, and started playing in a band locally here, and music just became really a big part of my life. In fact, probably obsessed with it. For like anything I probably tend to do in life, I go down a rabbit hole and just obsess over it for way deeper than probably most people do. Started repairing guitars, fixing guitars, and then started building instruments. And that really kicked off sort of going, all right, I think there's a really challenging aspect to this that really attracts me to it.
Okay.
It's not something I feel like I can master in a second. So I just kept building, basically.
So
and repairing.
was the first guitar you built an acoustic guitar or an electric?
It was electric, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of slapped together this sort of Telecaster from, parts of this and a neck of that. And that gave me a little bit of a taste. And of course, I knew how to finish it because I was an ex-spray painter.
Yeah.
And most people kind of looked at it and went, wow, this is really nice.
Because I guess one of the things that, I don't know if most people would know this, but going back from the 50s, nearly all guitar finishes were car paints.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. In fact, we used to just call them Juco back in, it was even some of the older guys that I did my apprenticeship with. Nitrocellulose, of course, I knew all about it. There was an element to certainly my first trade where we looked at the history of paints, and nitro was one of them. So
Mm-hmm.
I was already quite aware of how that was transitioned from the automotive industry into the guitar industry. So all of these kind of things were kind of connecting all the dots. A bit of woodworking experience, obviously, through carpentry. Of course, it wasn't fine detail, but and then I started to go. People started playing my guitars. Played the first couple of acoustic guitars and went, mate, these are really good. Like, have you thought about building some more? And I went, yeah, I'll think about it night and day. I'm just saving enough money to buy the next bit of material.
How long did it take you to make your first acoustic?
Oh, it was like 100+ hours, I think, and just obsessing over, way too much about.
Is that a much quicker process these days?
It can be, but it can be lengthy. It can be longer. So I get asked that question a bit, like how long does it take to make a guitar? The fundamentals are there. It's about 30 to 40 hours basically for the average Fenech guitar to come together. But there's many things that can change how long that takes. So the level of inlays we're doing and the complexity of the build, the nature of the Tonewoods we're using.
Some woods easier to work with than
Some
others.
woods are easier than others. If it's one of my master builds and I'm dealing with really, really expensive woods, that's kind of like everything turned off, no noise, like I'm really concentrating on doing certain things. But then I started to get into this deep kind of rabbit hole of, all right, there's all these funny little braces inside guitars. I know they all mean something. Today you can just about look up any of this stuff on Google and YouTube.
It's amazing the stuff you can look up.
But that stuff wasn't around back then.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, I don't know that I would have probably jumped on YouTube for the answer anyway. I'm probably not that sort of person. I'd like to, even if you had have told me the secret recipe, I probably would have went off and tried to prove it wrong. Or
done the experiments.
Yeah, and I think that's just the foundation of science, basically, and kind of who I am as a person.
Do you think you learn those lessons much better because you're doing the practical work behind it?
Oh, without a doubt. I think it gives you a much deeper understanding. And maybe it's different for other people, and that's okay, but I just know the way my brain works. And
You're very hands-on.
I'm very hands-on, and if I was always a visual learner, but a tactile learner as well. So I had to, feeling different tone woods, feeling their response, and basically, an instrument. I mean, there's the romantic side, and we've spoken about off-camera bands and influences, and I got, to know a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I guess, and people are influenced by things that they've heard previously,
without a doubt,
and their own previous experiences.
Yeah. And there's this kind of deep sort of passion about, and one of the things I sort of spoke off camera about is that, you know, we can, so I'll come to the sort of physics part in a minute, but a guitar is part art, part science. That's what it is.
Before we get into too many technical things,
Yep.
so you grew up in North Queensland.
Yep.
And you've done a couple of different apprenticeships, and you've done the whole university thing. When you were growing up, you came to playing guitar late. What were you listening to music-wise? What were your influences? And was that something that came from teenage years, or what was it that got you playing guitar at 20?
Yeah.
Was there being at uni? Was there people that you were around that influenced you in that way? Or
Oh, look, I've always loved music. Like, I dabbled playing instruments throughout my teenage years. There's no doubt about it. Played a little bit of drums at school. I'm a music lover. Like, I really am. And I grew up through the 90s as a teenager, so heavily influenced by all the bands out of, you know, Seattle and that type of stuff. But my dad was had a Marshall in the house, had a Strat.
Ah, okay.
Black Sabbath, you know, like it was, so, you know, but we listened to everything from a lot of Creedence, a lot of Tom Petty I spoke about, is one of my favourite artists.
Yeah.
A lot of Neil Young. So Mum was into the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac. So I listened to all of this great, and I love all music.
Yeah.
We probably didn't listen to country was about the only genre that we didn't really listen to, although it wasn't ever too far away. Being a North Queensland boy, it was always, you know, being played around. So a lot of the blues. So I always loved music. Any chance I got, I went and seen bands. But I think in my mind, whether or not it was ever impressed upon me, but being a musician was kind of like the thing that you waste your time doing. And even though deep down I probably wanted to play a guitar then and be in a band and do all these things, and, you know, we talked about before, two of my cousins were in a really popular band in Cairns at that time, and, you know, like, I was there front and centre every show, and it was a great community around there, sort of rise up through the ranks, and we watched, and so I always felt like I was really, really close to music, but never
There was a great live music scene in Cairns.
It was incredible. It was epic.
Back then, yeah.
Yep. So probably messed around with them, but never really in my own mind felt like I had enough time to just dedicate. And I am one of these people, I'll put off doing something if I don't think I've got the time to really invest in what I'm doing.
You get interested in making guitars. Is there anybody that you can look to as a role model that was making guitars that you could go, oh, I've seen someone else can do that? Or was it just one of those things you just did it off your own, out of your own curiosity?
Yeah, look, there probably was. There was probably lots of people. I just didn't do that. I didn't read any books on it. I built this kind of purpose-built space at home, this little shed, and told my wife what I was going to do, and she was like, yeah, go for it. You know, she knew I was so deeply into songwriting and playing guitar and gigging, and so music was just a big part of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to immerse in all of it.
When you started out doing this, what are you doing to earn a living, to pay the bills? What's going on in your life to pay the bills?
Yeah, so on the back end of the 10 years in WA, I worked for the university for a little while as a lecturer, sort of stuck around for a little while and doing some maths sort of lectures and stuff like that, and ocean physics. Did that for about 18 months. Then I started working in government. So I was working for what was called the Waters and Rivers Commission then. So doing what I now look like. It was great fun, great bunch of guys, heavy in the environmental type space. So water allocation, water licensing, that type of stuff. It seems so long ago now to even be talking about that. Moved back to travel around Australia for 12 months. Got back to the Gold Coast, picked up a job locally with the Environmental Protection Agency, and finished, sort of working in a state manager role, looking at, environmental licensing. And so all the time I've got this sort of almost a juxtaposition between I've got this sort of serious thing over here that pays the bills and, looks after my family and raising 2 kids. And I was working in Brisbane, and I'd catch the train home, and I'd get off the train and pick up my daughter at the time and, read my son a book, and then just straight out into the shed until midnight making guitars. And it just turned into this.
So you had a real passion for it.
Absolutely. And I think, now being in a position where I do read about how others other people in other industries and even the guitar industry, I sort of fit a very similar sort of profile, I think. A little bit weird, a little bit quirky, but sort of this need to actually understand. And I think it's kind of what kept the shed door being opened and the shed door not wanting to be closed, because I just so desperately wanted to understand how to make great guitars. And I kind of became an addiction. It was just a calling, I sort of felt. So much so that one day I just sort of went, well, how can I make this a full-time thing, a career? I thought a good thing that might help me at that stage was teaching other people how to make guitars.
I do remember there was a point where it was like you could go along and Aaron Fenech could teach you how to make a guitar.
Yeah, so I think we kicked that off in about 2016, I think. So 2015, 2016. And I thought, probably no one's going to want to do this. And we had 4 or 5 people sign up straight away. And I had a little space, which I'm still in, by the way, of, however many years later. But it's growing, obviously. And these guys turned up and I was like, right, well, here's some woods and here's some planes and chisels and I'm going to show you how to build an instrument. And it was great. I could only do it, I think I did 2 nights during the week, and I'd work all day Saturday and most of the day Sunday. So I was just working 7 days a week. And we had people, the school grew. I had more and more, not only locals, people coming down from Brisbane. Then we were doing 2-week courses and people were coming from overseas. Wow. We had one guy fly out from the UK 3 times. And the whole time I was learning more about guitars.
I was going to say to you, it's one of those things too, while you're teaching people, that's sometimes an incredible way to actually learn things yourself and reinforce the things that you know. Yeah,
look, I thank all of my early students for providing me. I mean, I provided them a service and a love affair of building something with their own set of hands. And it's deeply, it can be quite, some of the people that build guitars get quite emotional over the whole thing because they live such a separate life to that process. So it became almost like cathartic. People were coming just to spend 4 hours in my workshop a week and, I'd make them a cup of coffee and they go, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, today we're going to shape a neck. And they'd sit down and go, how am I going to do that? And I'm like, with your hands. And some spoke shaves and scrapers. And people would build, top to bottom an acoustic guitar. Or we didn't do electrics at that stage. But yeah, without doubt, the guitars just kept getting better and better, and I kept getting more requests to do different guitars. And the whole time in the back of my mind, I was still building instruments for people, one-off custom shops here and there, but it pushed me, I think, to become a much better maker.
It starts out in a small space. At what point do you make the decision to give away the day job and become a full-time guitar builder?
I think that happened in about, my memory's a bit shot on this, but it all seems like a bit of a roller coaster ride. It was either 2016 or 17, I think. And I was fortunate because I had long service leave in my sort of corporate job. And I went, okay, well, bit of a sit down and discussion with the wife. And my wife, Stacey, who still works in my business today, she's an integral part of what I do, just said, you've got to live your life. If this is what you're passionate about, I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's give it a go. And it was risky. I can look back now and go, wow, I'm paying off a mortgage. I've got all the stresses of what.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big decision to make. You've got a couple of kids, and it's like there's a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah, I think deep down I sort of thought I've never been afraid of hard work, and people often say to me, like, oh, you've done so much in a short period of time, or you've been able to, but they don't see that I work constantly at it. And I'm sure, you're the same. Like when your passion becomes your work, it's sort of, I don't see it as work.
Yeah.
It becomes this thing that's an extension of me and my thinking and my creativity. And if anything, I started to play less and less guitar. And as the years went on, so the connection with my band at the time was really important because I'm out playing live, and which is, I'm sure we'll get to it in a moment, about electric guitars. And so about 2016, 2017, and then that was the school sort of full-time, and then me part-time guitar making. we'd sell guitars here or there, and then we get some overseas orders and sort of, just slowly making way. And then it was really 2019 where I went, okay, and I kind of remember the day pretty well. I had my kids up at Freeman's Organic Farm up at Currumbin, sitting there, and there was a local muso, and he was playing a guitar and whatever it was, a Maton or something at the time. And he spotted me sitting down having a cup of coffee, and he walked over and he just said, man, I love your guitars. I'm desperately saving enough money to get one, And at that stage, a custom guitar for me was like an $8,000 process, and it was just in hours of labour. And I sort of drove home, and it just kept playing over in my mind. And I thought, well, I've got to try, and if I'm serious about doing this, I've got to try and find a way that I can make my guitars. I'm never going to be, Chinese cheap. I can't
make
do
them more
that.
affordable.
I somehow needed to make them more affordable, but with the same level of care and attention to detail. So I started prototyping. Prior to that point, I was just building, Martin Dreadnought shapes and Martin OM style guitars.
And you're basically making them all by hand.
Making them all by hand. No CNC machines, no nothing.
Yeah.
And that's completely simply because I couldn't afford those machines, really. But I wasn't at the volume that it was required. So then I went back literally to the drawing board and went, okay, what you're seeing in front of you today are completely originally designed shapes. And then I started to take a deep dive into the physics of, if I'm going to change the shapes, how's that going to impact the tone? How's it going to impact the fundamental air frequency? If I do my braces at this angle versus that angle, if I scallop them here versus leave them pyramided there, and all these little marketing terms, which I'm sure you've heard.
Oh, the
over the year, all of this sort of, and I had to really, I was already a long way through weeding out what most of that meant. Doing funny things like writing programs in Audacity and sticking SM57s inside sound holes and looking at all these squiggly little lines and looking at frequency response curves. I went and did a course with a fellow down who's sort of renowned for looking at the physics of acoustic guitars. And it was really the first time it was about 2015 or 2016 or something like that. Could have even been earlier, I'm not sure. And I went, okay, I just want to test my understanding here of what's going on. And in some ways, I still had a bit to learn, but in other ways, it actually really drove home the point that my job as a maker is to get the guitar to be as good as it possibly can, but it's never to please everybody. And it's impossible because of this beautiful thing that most people find frustrating, but I think that's so exciting about guitars, and that's tone is subjective. Yeah. And it's why, we're talking about Strats, Tallys, Les
people
Pauls
have diverse ranges of things that they like and don't like.
It's just a beautiful thing because mathematically we can make a guitar through tuning all the internal braces and controlling its air resonance and doing all these things. We can make them so that they're stereo kind of sound all the same all the time, but that'd be a really boring world to live in, I think.
Yeah.
So kicked off that journey, new shapes, new bracing, new voicing, how the guitars could come together. I started playing around with CNC machines, using them to simply just take the work away from my hands and my wrist, profiling guitar necks. That just led into thousands of hours of anyone who thinks you can just buy one of these machines and just hit a button, you're kidding yourself.
Because they have to be programmed
to
do what you want them to do.
I think my wife actually runs our CNC machine, so she's the brain behind that. I sat there just going, no, it's not the way it needs to feel in a hand. And we kept changing things. I reckon 2,000 hours went into designing a first guitar neck. And you couldn't find a file. There was no files that existed. There were a million Telecaster necks and things like that. But it had to be specific to the way I wanted my guitars to feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it's so important to be a guitarist. Like, we know how guitars should feel and respond. And that was just really, really important to me. And the fact that we use a one-piece neck, which is a traditional thing in guitar making.
Okay.
There's a lot of, shorter ways you can, cut off the heel and stack the heel and scarf joint and all of these things. And they make guitar necks that way. And I did that for a lot of years.
Because the Gibson's a scarf joint.
They are, yes, and they glue on their wingtips on the side.
So that neck is just all one.
It's all one piece. So
of wood.
yeah, we cut it from a 4-inch by 4-inch mahogany block, and we get 2 necks out of that block. So it's a traditional way of building a guitar neck, and it's why I sort of leave a little bit of mass in the volute behind and a forward-facing truss rod. We'll come to all that. They're all the boring details about guitars, but so all of these things introduce an element of complexity into the design phase. And then my poor wife, because I'd go, I need to move the sound hole and it needs to move by like 0.5 of a millimetre, and she's like, why? Like, what difference does it make? And I'm like, well, it makes all the difference, because if I don't put the fingerboard's got to be overhang by that much, and the sound hole's got to be there, because if the bridge isn't right in exactly the right position, then my bracing won't work effectively. And I'm trying to get the guitar top to move a certain way to make my guitars sound sweet and the way that I want them to sound. And one thing I was acutely aware is that all of these great guitars that I've got the benefit, I mean, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So, and, through my years of repairing, high quality American guitars and which was really the birth of the steel string instrument, came out of the US, I had the ability of looking at what works really well for them and what works really poorly for them. And sometimes they don't change because of the size of the company. They're not agile enough. A simple change is millions of dollars worth of retooling or rejigging. But for me at that stage, it's, we're still at that stage where, we build 300 instruments a year now with my team, but we're still agile enough to change something. So my favourite saying is, we're going to fail, let's fail quick, and let's move on, and let's learn from it and go, okay, that didn't work. And, but if we were making 1,000 guitars a day like some of these larger guitar companies are, that's pretty bloody hard. You're probably 50,000 guitars deep before you realise there's a problem.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you see, which I bought a small sample today, but all of my guitars, and it's something I'm quite proud of, nothing's copied, nothing's, it's been completely purpose designed, really set the benchmark for what I wanted them to sort of be. You can design, some people go at guitar design as, I'm going to try and make the cheapest guitar I can, or I'm going to try and make the lightest guitar or the heaviest guitar, or a guitar to look a certain. I sort of wrote down all of the characters and, the sub headings of all of these things, aesthetics, weight, look, shape, feel, design, tone, sound, scale, length, ebony boards, rosewood boards, like all of these things. And I was acutely aware that guitar companies have that signature sound simply because of this ingredients that we all put into a big stirring pot. And so mine really have, Fenick now sounds like a Fenick, and it's something I'm quite proud of.
Well, let's start with, so this particular guitar here.
Yeah, yep.
It's
the Roadster.
Ooh, it's a beautiful.
That's okay. This one's road worn.
Well, this is your personal,
my personal one.
Personal
it's the
guitar.
only one I've actually got at the moment because we've sold everything else. But
and it's a very, very lovely. Ooh, don't bash it.
That's all right. Yeah.
Oh, didn't take any paint off. And it's really nice to play too. The action is, the neck shape, the action feels amazing. So, why
that shape?
Well, why the shape?
Yeah.
And you were saying, I guess this is one of those things, you were saying you use ebony.
Yeah.
Ebony boards, because we were talking about the difference between different ebonies and, different rosewoods and all that sort of stuff. But you use ebony on pretty much all your guitars.
Pretty much everything. I didn't always do that. There's one model that we used rosewood on. I'll start back. So, first sort of jump into electric guitar playing. I played a Tele, and I love them. I didn't know why I loved them. I think probably because Tom Petty played one. But you'd see rock guys playing them.
I mean, they're the ubiquitous guitar. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that say if you only ever had to have one guitar, it would be a Tele.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, even if you go back to Led Zepp, everyone thinks of Jimmy Page playing a Les Paul, but all of the recorded stuff was a Tele.
Through a Tele, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know really why I started there. Maybe it was my love affair because it was the first sort of guitar that I built. And then, second one was an acoustic guitar. But I had no idea why it played a certain way. I didn't even know at that stage that it had a 25.5 scale. It was just, that all came later. I just knew that, they looked kind of cool. And I sort of looked at it like guitars like Strats and Les Pauls, and I'm like, why did they do that? Why did they cut that thing there and do, So again, my curious mind going, well, maybe they designed a Telecaster this way because it was just simple to put together. And that was Leo Fender's design. It's so military in its like, it's kind of, but it works, and it works incredibly well, and it spans genres. And so I did that. Then I bought, I think I went into buying Gibson guitars. I had some 335s and various models. I had just about everything that you could play and try. I knew I liked semi-hollow tone for what that sort of more acoustic, almost sort of phonic sort of airy sound that it gets. Solid bodies, I hadn't really got into the Les Paul type, 24 3/4 humbucker sound, but I'd played guitars with humbuckers. I then started to think, okay, well, if I was going to design some electric guitars, and then by that stage I just about had owned most guitars, and I went, well, and then thinking about players too, probably what led me down to produce this instrument, because this was the second one. I produced a guitar called the Bentley first, which was also semi-hollow, but Gibson scale, 24 3/4, 2 humbuckers, really simple guitar, but it was built off my love affair with this Gibson guitar that I had, and there were things about the Gibson that I absolutely hated. Bloody thing wouldn't stay in tune, and it's coming from a guitar maker. It was just, I don't know what it was, but I loved it. And I loved seeing me play it on stage. I loved the sound of it. But
it had a certain character.
It just had a character and a feel. The neck profile, basically that neck profile has come from my love affair with that neck profile. But I knew I wanted to do something with my flair, and so there were things I liked about Strats and Tallies, that body cutaway, which is this has got the offset.
It gives you a nice access to the upper frets.
Yeah, like the that sort of cutaway, the body cut through here, even down to having a neck join. There were some things that I didn't like about bolt-on necks.
Yeah.
Which I sort of thought, well, like maybe I should just do set necks. And so again, just learning off different instruments. I've got to say, the other thing about that guitar, which is wonderful, is it sits really nicely. It does. When you're sitting down, it sits really nicely on your leg. Yeah. Sort of like a Strat. Yeah. And it's got very Gibson. Like it's an interesting, weird combination between Fender and Gibson. Yeah. It's got. And look, some people, the offset body looks great. I think it does, particularly that in that configuration, the white and gold. I love the colour combo. It looks awesome. It didn't start out this colour. It used to be a midnight black burst. But I love that, that classic look of those classic. And everyone has their favourite. It's that thing. It's a very individual taste. Everyone has different. It's one of my favourite classic combinations of colours. White and gold. And then I think too, at the time, being influenced, I was in an indie rock band and I wrote a lot of indie rock style music, with that type of flair. So I wanted the guitar. The guitar had to kind of do that as well. So I sort of drifted away from that Telecaster sound. Not that it can't do that, but I felt more at home. Does it have split coils? Yeah, this one does. Yeah, so you can get the single coil sound. It's got that. And, my other love affair in life is surfing, so I love this sort of wave block. Oh, okay, yeah. Which was, sort of important. Yeah, just little things that I wanted to. And then, of course, I was playing them live. So I was sort of road testing them and people would come up going, man, I love a look at that guitar. It sounds great. And little things like thumb rests and stuff I was just trialling. I'm always trialling different things to go, well, where does my hand sit? Where do most people's hands sit? I volume ride when I play, so I wanted to, all of these things as a guitar designer. Yeah. Where do you put the knobs? Yeah. Where do you put the switch? Yeah. I can put the switch here, I can put the switch here, I can put the switch there. The first lot of Roadsters, the jacking plates were there. And then I went to play a show one night, I think I was at somewhere in Broadbeach, and I was so
couldn't put the guitar-
stoked. Yeah, I was
Couldn't put the guitar down.
I was so stoked with this guitar, and I was telling the guys in my band, I'm like, I can't wait to play this guitar live. I'm frothing, and I went to put the guitar on a stand. And I went, didn't think of that. Like offset body doesn't work on a stand, and I had to lean it on my amp all night. So just little things like that, and then I went, okay, through the strap, better there, and we brought it to market basically, and we started selling them, and they were really, really popular. That was,
What is a guitar like that worth?
I think we were retailing them at the time for about $3,000.
Okay.
Yeah, 2,999, and they
Yeah.
were sort of probably. We had a few different variations of them. So some were, you'd sort of see them in shops for sort of mid 2000s or whatever, which was about as cheap as I could possibly do them. I mean, there's a lot of, without going through everything, all of my guitars feature undercut fret ends. So look, it's effectively like every guitar's bound. Really, really high components, because I thought and still believe that I'll put that back down.
It'll stand the test of time and...
Well, I think fundamentally in life, you get particularly when you're designing something, it's a set of choices. So
Yeah.
I start every day with a set of choices. You can choose to not do that because it's going to save $1, or not do this or not do that. Of course, you can't go and put $6,000 worth of materials that are in a guitar that's going to sell for $3,000, but you can certainly give the player the most of what you can put in. And that's sort of circling back now to that guy that I'd seen that said he was desperately saving for one of my guitars. I wanted to start producing guitars that were incredible for, might not be someone's first guitar, but I knew I had to hit that sort of $3,000 mark and make it a serious guitar for serious musicians. Take care of all the stuff that I used to constantly tech people's guitars, give them really high quality nut, saddle, pins, machine heads. If it was an electric guitar, great quality pickups, pots, capacitors, great cases, things that meant stuff to guitar players. We'll worry about the profit part later. Still trying to figure that part out. But I knew that if I started there, that was going to put my brand in a good position, and it has. People now sort of see us as, we're a premier brand in Australia.
Yeah.
Even, we went to the NAMM show for the first time. Well, it was my second time, but my first time exhibiting under Fenech Guitars, and the response we had was just incredible. And even that brand reach that we've been able to get now. So, yeah.
I guess the difficult thing then becomes, from your point of view, with the guitars gaining popularity and getting increased demand, is how do you meet that demand?
Well, firstly, you got to figure out what type of company you want to be. So some of the guys that work with me are still some of my first students. And it's been, my wife's obviously integral in the business. We've grown now. We sort of got up to about 8 employees at one point. And of course, that's even, it's kind of, you put your head on your pillow at the night. And if you're in business, anyone out there in business understands this, that at times you're just freaking out. How am I going to cover costs? How am I going to... because when you've got full-time employees, you can't shy away from paying wages. It's just something, paying rent, paying leases. Materials for guitars you have to buy so far in advance. Often we're buying 5 years in advance to try and sort of, make sure those woods are ready.
Once you have a piece of timber, do you have to store it for a certain amount of time? Like when you say make sure it's ready, what does that mean?
Well, it's all in the moisture content. So trees are cut, they sort of have a wet moisture content that sits up around 30-40%. Instruments need to be dried between, the wood's got to come right down to 6 to 8% moisture content. Larger guitar companies take green wood, they kiln dry it. It's a very, very fast process, and they can turn it into guitars in a very short period of time. That works. It works for them, but there's some really big issues that can happen when you force wood. Essentially, kiln drying is boiling the moisture out of the wood. Some wood comes through that process okay, and if the QC process is really high inside those factories, you don't end up. But I'm sure you've been around long enough to see necks warping and bodies moving, and so it came down for us to go, well, what's the vision of what this, what do I want it to look like? Because I started to realise this could get away from me really, really fast, and I had investors offering me that, you could be the biggest guitar company in Australia. What do you want to do? And do you want to do this? And do you want to do that? And people want your guitars. But it's not really what I wanted. I want to work with a small, passionate team. We want to build incredible guitars. We want to be busy, and we are extremely busy. We do want to grow, but we want to make sure that growth's sustainable. I have no desire to be the biggest guitar company in the world. We're really, really happy with where the position of the brand is, and now it's just about expanding. I like training people. I like teaching people the art of guitar making. So for me, it's actually important to grow training local people and introduce them to what is a fantastic career. I mean, there's only, the other major guitar makers are down in Melbourne. And so we kind of see ourselves really as being in a really fortunate position.
So I guess the other
now.
guitar makers, we're talking Maton, Cole Clark.
Yeah, Maton and Cole Clark. Maton, I don't know how many, they produce a lot more guitars than we do. I don't really know. I've heard 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 guitars a year. Cole Clark are probably about the same. They employ, 60 odd staff, somewhere between 30 and 60 staff. So but it's fundamentally a different process to what we do. We operate like a large custom shop. Yeah. So we don't batch build instruments. So in a factory sense, there's a big, there's stacks of wood piled everywhere and everything's being thicknessed at exactly the same. There's a big number. Every guitar top's got to be 3.2 millimetres, and nothing sort of seems to change. And this is by no way a kick at any of those companies, because I have a deep respect for those guys and anybody really in the industry. But what I do know is that if you want to build high quality instruments, you have to build them one at a time and treat them one at a time, because no two trees are the same.
So every piece of timber is different.
Every piece of timber is different. We can cut, 6 or 7 spruce tops off one billet, off one block, and it'll vary from the top of the billet to the bottom of the billet. So the stress-strain relationship, the way and that all comes back to that musicality. So we need to, that guitar top might be 2.8 millimetres thick. This one might be 3 millimetres. That one might be 2.9. They'll all be different. And we call that individually optimising. So we're optimising the woods to get the characteristics that we want for that body size and that instrument. And custom shops all over the world know this. It's why you pay more for a custom shop guitar. It's why guitarists immediately recognise a difference. And if you don't, then you're not getting what you're paying for. But most of us do. If you pick up a custom shop Fender or something, they're taking care of the little 1%ers, the 0.5%ers. They're using lower mass wood, high velocity of sound, all of these things. We take that approach into all of my guitars, even at what we call an entry-level price, because it's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? So $3,000 to me means what it means to you. It's a lot of money, but I do guitars 10, 15,000, and upwards of that.
So a master, like this is a master build?
No. So these are all from my standard
Are they standard series?
Yeah, standard series, but that's at the top. This is a new one. That's called a Supreme Series Acoustic.
Let's be very, very careful and gentle with this. But it's a... Didn't even tune it up. It's already in tune?
Yeah.
All close.
Clay.
Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Nice and big and full and warm.
Yeah.
This is kind of a new thing that we're doing at the moment.
The colour, is that because of the timber? It's a beautiful colour.
Yeah, look,
it's a very unique. I haven't seen one that particular.
It's actually
colour.
all genuine mahogany back and sides with a really high quality top called Lut Spruce top. Okay. But it just comes from my love affair with Americana style guitars, and I don't shy away from that. I mean, we spoke briefly about my understanding of scale lengths, and sort of talking about the other Aussie companies. They're a longer scale length than my instruments. They sit over 25 inches.
Okay.
Or 25.5, I think they are. We're 25, so we're a Martin scale, what would be considered a Martin scale length. And it kind of drives the tonal centre for my guitars, but that's by design. It's by purpose. So I've often found most guitars I've interacted with at that longer scale length, for me, are just a fraction too bright. And it's the one part of acoustic guitars that I was like, oh, I kind of don't, it doesn't really gel with whether it was my playing or the way that my ear perceives that tone, because it is different.
Are Gibson acoustics the same scale length as Gibson electrics?
Some of them are, and I won't profess to know everything about them.
I was just curious. It's something I never even thought about. I know what a Gibson electric scale length is, but I've never really thought about their acoustics.
Yeah, so one of the things, I guess, that I do and that I've been... We came to market with like a suite of instruments that I thought would appeal over a number of sort of price points, really. And I was fortunate enough to meet a guy at the time that was a former... Well, he was still working for Maton at that point. He was a sales rep and had been with those guys for a long time. And he came across my guitars and went, man, these things are great. Like, you know, have you ever thought about bringing a retail range to market? And I said, well, I'm working really hard on that now. I just can't figure out a way to actually, you know, build them in the time that we need to build them in to allow to give, you know, a store a bit of a margin to sell them, and trying to really figure all that out.
And I guess you've got to make enough, you would hope, so that they've all got at least a couple in stock.
That's right. Yeah. So there was all of that. How many can I build? So at that stage, we're probably building 50 or 60 instruments a year. Mm-hmm. And balancing my school as well.
So if you're talking 50 or 60 a year, it's almost one a week.
Pretty much, yeah. And I was doing that while just me, and while I was doing my school as well. So I had...
So you were busy.
I was busy, and I put on... if people out there want to know how I afforded, you know, my first employee, we basically borrowed the money to employ my first employee, and that was one of my former students, and he's still with me today, and he knows an incredible amount about guitar making, and I'm deeply grateful that I've got him and all of my team. But it was a challenge, but I never not thought I could do it, because I thought I so desperately want to do it, and I want to show people what can be done when, you know, I'm not one of these people that knows a lot of people in the industry but I knew a lot about guitars, and I kind of see them as all great for different reasons. I just knew that I wanted mine to look and feel and sound a certain way. And I think probably we launched in 2020, right before. I mean, I attended
COVID.
Oh my God. And I think we're saying off camera, because you asked about my cases, and there's one behind me, which are excellent.
Yeah, I'll take some pictures, and we'll put the pictures of the cases up, because the cases... That's one of the first things when you turned up, and I'm like, these cases are awesome.
Yeah,
they're really nice.
They're made by a company, TKL, which is an American brand. And in 2020, they just reached out to me and said, "Hey, you're going to come to the NAMM show?" And I'm like, I can't afford that. Like, you know, don't even know what that's worth to exhibit over there. I'd done the Melbourne Guitar Show, which kind of put us on the map, sort of thing. But hey, we're here, we're Fenech Guitars. And he's like, well, you know, we invite some boutique guitar makers to come and put some guitars on our stand every year. We'd love to have you. And I went, oh, wow, that's so I did some Googling and had a look who was there the year before, and, you know, there were Custom Shop Martins and, you know, Santa Cruz guitars and Bourgeois and Collings and things, all these great companies that I've...
Nice high-end guitars.
Beautiful high-end guitars
good company there.
That I sort of deeply respected. So I jumped on a plane and went over and met Tom, the owner of TKL, and we sat down with him, and people were looking at my guitars, and we sold those ones that were on the booth. And it was a bit of an insight into the industry, just going, oh my God, this show is massive. And some months prior to that, I'd gone to the Shanghai show in, I think they call it Music Mess or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Gigantic. It actually makes the NAMM show look small in comparison. And so in the very short space of time, I'd been to this huge thing, which is, it spans over hectares, whatever it is, in China, walking around rooms of instruments, tens of thousands of them. And it almost kind of broke my heart a little bit. I was like, how am I going to find my way through this forest of all this stuff? How are we going to cut through? But in my heart, I kind of knew that we would, because we're different, we're small, you know, we're and I didn't need to make that sort of volume of guitars. So I, you know, sort of went home and sort of rocked myself to sleep that night from the China show. But fast forward, going over to the NAMM show, it was a different experience. I sort of found The American people that were just so supportive and didn't get a bad, everything was so supportive about my guitars, and have you thought about this, and I'm going to put you in contact with this person, and you should meet this person, and it started this sort of relationship really. And Tom, I was just like, because he works with these huge companies, why do you want to work with us with making guitar cases? And he just said, because it's where I started my business, and you guys are at the heart and soul of what we do. We love working with small makers, and so we set about designing specific cases for my acoustic guitars, and he just kept instilling in me that you don't buy off-the-shelf cases for great guitars. And here's the reasons why: because they move a little bit in transit, they do all these. And so he just kept talking about the quality of my instruments like he knew them and like he was a part of my team. And it made me sit back and go, you know what, he's absolutely right. And if we've come this far, let's go with the great case as well. I don't know what this is going to cost me, but let's go there. And fast forward, we're still with TKL today. And they're a really nice case. And you were saying they're tested for like airport security and being dropped out of planes and all sorts of things. Yeah, well, coming back to Gibson, I think Gibson have done most of that testing in them. So they've chucked them off 3 feet, 6 feet. Like, they do all these airport hangar tests, and he's got a really interesting story actually, that they were testing these Les Pauls apparently, and it was just getting out of hand. These guitars getting chucked, and they actually opened one of there was nothing wrong with the case, but the neck had actually come out of the pocket on one of these Gibson guitars. So whether or not there's any truth in it, I don't know. But
it's not hard to do. I've had a couple of those sort of things happen to Gibsons. I mean, I've got an SG at the moment that I had the typical neck break, and I've had that repaired,
fixed,
which is wonderful.
Lots of them.
And then a couple of weeks later got to a gig, and the neck is separated from the body.
Yep.
And it sits in a typical Gibson, like a standard case, not anything special.
Yep.
And I'm sort of thinking, well, maybe I've got to buy a nicer case for it.
Yeah, look, and I mean, over the years too, and this comes back to why I never really, sort of, not one of these people that steps on another guitar. I've been an assessor for other, warranty agent for other guitar brands. Some of them we've spoken about today. A lot of the times when people are bringing me, guitars and sort of saying, is this a warrant? It's,
they've been mistreated.
They've been mistreated. And, guitars like this are a timber balloon. They're gonna expand and contract. We do our very best to get the woods as stable as we possibly can. My entire workshop here on the Gold Coast is temperature and humidity controlled. We're going to those extra lengths because it is important to build a guitar at exactly 50% relative humidity. Most people that are really serious about instrument making know this.
Wow.
And it's
that would be an expensive thing to do, wouldn't it?
My air cons are on 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They don't turn off. We've got foggers. So this time of year, actually, believe it or not, on the Gold Coast, it's quite dry. So
yeah, well, it's winter time.
Yeah, so we're fogging a little bit to keep the woods at that optimum.
Get the moisture level up.
Just fractionally, get it back to sort of 45, 50%. If you glue a guitar in a really low humidity environment and then it moves to a high humidity environment, it's just not going to stay together.
Oh, wow.
And conversely, if it's built in cans at 90% humidity and then goes to Melbourne, it's not going to work either. It's going to crack. And so guitars, electrics are a little bit more forgiving, but when you're working with such fine, solid woods, things can move and expand really, really easily.
With the electrics, do you make any with electric pickups or anything like that in the guitars, or are they just purely acoustic?
These ones?
Yeah.
So they all come with preamps in them.
Okay. What sort of preamps have they got in them?
LR bags.
Oh, okay,
from the United States. Yeah. So it's a little sound hole activated inside there.
Oh, okay.
When we came to market, it was one of the other reasons I went to China.
So I was just the only reason I asked because obviously we're looking at the guitars and you can't see any. There's no volume control or tone, but obviously there's
volume and tone inside here.
Oh, okay.
Look, and again, it's one of these design things, right? So I just could never understand, pardon me, why there's this ugly black box on the side of a guitar. And
well, you've got to cut a hole in it for starters too.
Well, there's that, and after you've spent all these hours building a guitar, well, actually, that's not right. I do understand because it's easy for a musician to just turn something that's right in front of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember I bought the guitar you saw next door,
Yep.
the Martin OMJM.
Yeah.
There's no controls. It's like you plug the guitar in and play it. It's like it sounds amazing. But no volume control, no tone controls, no... And I thought, when I first got it, I thought, oh, man, how am I going to... Where's my volume? I want a volume knob and I want to be able to control all the... And I pretty soon worked out that the guitar just sounds amazing. Don't mess with it.
Yeah. Look, and it's probably a really good segue because when I started coming to market with guitars, no one asked me in the US or when I was overseas what preamps I was using. It's just because they don't tend to focus on that. Cutaways and preamps aren't really front and centre.
It's more about making just a great acoustic instrument.
Yeah, they just wanted to know, is it going to sound like a great Neil Young album? But in Australia, the conversation, I quickly learned, is dominated by acoustic preamps. And, Maiten have had such great success with the AP5, Cole Clark, a lot of their marketing. I don't want to speak too much for those guys, but they make a great acoustic pickup. And, of course, once your mate Steve-O plays one at the pub, then you just want to sound like Steve-O. And it's been this sort of replicating. It is that
thing of, like we were talking about before, people want what they're used to.
That's right. And that's great. But for me, I didn't want to be known. I found it quite daunting, but also frustrating to a point that people wanted to talk to me about. I'm like, but they're like, I love the guitar, but what? I'm like, but you're about to buy a $5,000 guitar, and you care about this thing that's worth $100. It's like, it was a really weird thing for me because when you go and record, and you would know this in a studio, you're recording in front of a beautiful microphone. Yeah. So front and center for me, I thought from day one, I want to be known for making great sounding acoustic guitars. That was my primary thing, and I'm really, really proud of that fact. That's first and foremost. I'll worry about the preamp later, because when you start to make responsive guitars, so most factory-made guitars are, from my perspective and from a builder's perspective, are what we call overbuilt. So thicker tops, thicker backs, less responsive, thicker bracing, until you get to a custom shop level. And the reason being, they probably are going to handle a little bit more heat, changes, getting banged around. There's not enough cost in the instrument for each one to be tuned a specific way, for the woods to be sort of thinned until you're getting the right sort of flex, stress, strain response, which works really well with acoustic preamps. Because when you put an acoustic preamp inside an overbuilt sound box, it sounds huge through a PA.
Yeah, it doesn't sound great acoustically.
Doesn't sound necessarily great acoustically. They can, but from my experience, not so much. It's probably more fluke than anything. The way we build acoustic guitars and the way I build acoustic guitars is they're super responsive, which means they're kind of built like a sports car. So, which is not easy to get an acoustic preamp to work with them off the shelf. So we tried companies like, in the early days, Fishman, K&K and all these companies. It was the main reason I went to China, was to look at, acoustic preamps. And I coupled up with a company called Double, and we went, brought back some samples. These work really well for my guitars. There was an absolute, certainly non-negotiable. I do not want any preamp that needs to be routed in the side of the instrument, because I'm also from the mindset that even though I could, in my own opinion, find the most perfect preamp for you, if it's not right for you as a musician, you're going to want to pull that out. And I've done enough acoustic preamp swap-overs in guitars for people to know that's just it. So it's another one of these things going, I'm going to future-proof. I can pull one of those out in under 2 minutes. There's no change to the instrument at all. Also, some of the acoustic preamps, the large piezo systems bolt up underneath the bridge plate of the acoustic guitar. The way it's kind of like dropping a huge anchor under what we've just done, all this voicing.
So it's defeating the purpose.
It's defeating the purpose of making a really responsive acoustic guitar. Yeah. So, if you kind of think of it like a split column, we've got tone was never a compromise. There were certain things I'd compromise on, like a colour or something, but no routing in the external part of the guitar. And certainly, it had to be secondary to the tone of the instrument. That worked for a number of years. We used that preamp. We came to market. There's, probably 1,000 of them out there. Its problem, probably initially, was that I made them too powerful. because in my own personal, I wanted spades of bass. Every acoustic guitar player, you're playing in front of a PA, you kind of want the thing to sound like a big stomp box. So,
yeah.
We got sort of guys that are punching the back of the neck and doing all kinds of crazy things. So we were constantly telling people...
Basically beatboxing on a guitar and bashing it and all sorts.
Yeah, I was forever getting phone calls and, my guitar's distorting and things like this. And we just go, yep, just turn it down. That's all you got to do. And then I started to realise this other important lesson. If I kind of look at the last 5 years, not everybody knows as much about guitars as I do and preamps and things like this. And it was probably wrong for me to even sort of consider that part. Most people just plug it in, turn it on 10, away they go. But they're forgetting that that's boosting the signal that's coming through a PA. Whereas most of us know from playing live or electrics, you never sound check at 10. You've got nowhere to go. You sound check at 5 sort of thing, so that you've got a little bit of an accelerator to push. So then I started talking with LR Bags in the US, and the owner of that company used to be an acoustic guitar maker. He completely understood enough about making fine instruments to know what I was challenged with about having such responsive guitars. And, the systems that we've got now are just absolutely incredible. The feedback we're getting, and look, it's not design, it's an off-the-shelf.
Feedback as in customer feedback.
Yeah, customer feedback.
Not feedback.
Well, it's funny because this whole thing about dominated conversation in Australia by Cutaways and Preamps. Almost, in fact, last year, apart from these specialty series that we don't do cutaways in, I don't even offer them because I just want them to look a certain way. We didn't build, I think it was either 23 and 24, the Australian market, I didn't build a non-cutaway guitar. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I love the cutaway. The cutaway, but it gives you access, obviously, higher up the fretboard.
It does.
Whereas, like a guitar like this, it's actually quite difficult to get up on the top end of the fretboard.
It is. And for me, what I started doing is any chance I got doing a guitar clinic in a music store, and I sort of do them. We've got 20 odd dealers around the country, so I sort of skip around the place and they organise these nights and people come in to look at all the guitars and we have someone that they're playing. And I talk about guitars all the time. And I'm like, do you have a cutaway? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you use it? And they're like, not really. I'm like, why do you have one? Oh, because my buddy had one or someone else had one. And then I started looking at, guys like Tommy Emmanuel and all these great players who don't play cutaways. It's not that I don't think they're necessary. I think, and if somebody wants a cutaway and a guitar, happy to do it, which is why I designed my own because I sort of wanted them to look.
It's nice to play that one.
Yeah, a certain way. But it's just interesting that I think we sort of gravitate towards trends and sort of things like that. So,
obviously, the guitar acoustically sounds different with a cutaway than the full body. Do you have to? Does that create certain problems making a cutaway?
Well, I don't get asked this question a lot with what we consider our standard range to be, but when customers are approaching me about a master build, which, at another level, we're using really, really expensive woods, everything's completely customised, they'll often ask me, can I hear the difference between a cutaway and a non-cutaway? If you could somehow... So firstly, mathematics and physics would tell me that you could. Right? Whether or not you can, because of the natural variation between the two, we could build that guitar twice, one with a cutaway, one without.
Different. Yeah.
Simply because of the diversity in the wood. So even though I might be tuning that instrument the same way, the same set of hands built it, there will be a subtle difference, and that's enough to probably negate the difference between a cutaway. What I would say is if you don't think you're going to use it, don't have it, because you are changing the air volume inside a guitar. That would obviously affect. It changes the fundamental, what we call the fundamental frequency, the air frequency that comes from the sound.
I was just thinking it might change the amount of projection the guitar would have.
Yeah, well, projection is caused by many things, and that's like if you kind of think of all of the physics inside a guitar sound box as like this long mathematical equation with lots of little things in brackets. We're kind of talking about one little isolated number inside a bracket.
0.1% difference.
Yeah, that's right, which we might change, and if nothing else changed along that curve, then it would change. But, on this side of the transposition, you're going to have one answer and the other side will say something else. So it's not that it... So the thing I sort of try to talk to customers about is there's no right or wrong. it's impossible for me to put every tone into one guitar, which is why we all own lots of different guitars. But fundamentally, if you don't need it, you know, and some people just say, I just love the look of a non-cutaway guitar. And that for me is enough of a reason to not have it, because, you know, guitars need to look great, they need to sound great, and they need to play well. And I know they're three very basic things, but if a guitar strikes your eyes as being the, you know, the sexiest, coolest thing, and we've all got those guitars, they're the ones that you just have to clip the case open just to have a look, and even if you don't have time to play it that day, but it will drive you back to playing that instrument. I just find it really
weird how my personal preference would be to buy a Cutaway.
Yeah.
But the two guitars that you've seen that I own are both non-Cutaway.
Yeah, I did take notice of that, by the way. And look, that's because you obviously, or just hit your microphone, as a serious musician, know the importance of having upper fret access on an acoustic guitar, which is one of the reasons why, by the way, and we'll come to this guitar, it's got a beautiful piece of camphor laurel, that I've done my heel shape a particular way. So some guitar companies have a full round heel. That actually stops your hand getting
in there.
But you can sort of see when my hand's resting there, like, but you'd be able to do almost the same position on that non-cutaway guitar. It just allows your hand to creep up. So again, that's just one of those choices. What heel shape am I going to do? What neck profile am I going to do? And so taking, you know, that into account of, if I have a non-cutaway guitar and a big chunky heel, it might not give someone that upper fret access.
Tell me the difference between, and I can see what appears to be from this angle, those two guitars have a different size sound hole.
They do, yeah, well spotted.
So what difference does that make in an acoustic guitar?
Well, again, think about that long equation. What we're doing, so this one's 98 millimetres, that one's 100, so your eye just picked up.
That's 2 mil. That's
2 millimetres.
I mean, it's amazing. I was just almost doubting myself for going, are they different or they?
No, they are. And again, teaching myself guitar making, it was one of those questions. Like, the questions were all written down on these pieces of foolscap paper, and I don't even know if people know what foolscap is anymore, but it's one of those long books with lines and written in my shed at home.
An A4 page with...
Yeah, that we all used to write on at school. And sound holes, like, why does a Gibson have 102, and why are some guitars 95? Why is some... So basically, it's relevant to the body size, it's relevant to the body depth, and it's relevant to how the air escapes the guitar. So all of that is kind of wrapped up in some fairly complicated physics equations. But one of the questions that some very clever person asked me in the back of a room one night was, would a guitar sound like a guitar if it didn't have a sound hole? And the answer is, yeah, it will. Because you're not hearing only the air frequency, you're hearing the frequency of the top.
Yeah.
The sound waves travelling across the top of the guitar. And there's really clever people that have done this under electron microscopes, and we can simulate that type of thing by putting very fine sand on the guitar, and we can send a frequency sort of that sends a vibration, and we can form these really cool patterns called Gelandi patterns, and that's one of the ways we optimise guitar tops to move in their main modes. So most guitar makers, whatever point they're at in their journey, whether they know it or not, and to get guitars to sound consistently the way you want them, you really do have to understand that process about how a guitar top moves in a monopole fashion or a dipole fashion. And it's less so about tripole on an acoustic guitar or steel string guitar. And that's inherent by the way you've braced it. And so if you have an X brace at 100 degrees or 95 degrees, or bridge plates here and lower face braces pulled apart, parallel, 50 mil apart, like all of those
variation is just...
So much variation, and there's no... And I come back to this, I mean, I love the sound of my guitars, but I love the sound of lots of other people's guitars too. There's no right or wrong. There's just a recipe that you like to cook. And eventually you find that fit where you go, you know, for me, it was when people started to interact with all of my guitars and just go, man, I just can't decide. They're all great. And I'm like, okay.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a good recipe. Now I've got a pretty good recipe. And so, yeah, it's well picked up. Dreadnought, slightly, there's actually something that you wouldn't be able to pick up, but that I designed by purpose. This is a different body shape. So this is one of my grand auditoriums. It has a slightly wider lower bout to my Dreadnought by about 5 millimeters, but it's slightly tighter in the waist. But the upper portion is almost identical. And one of the things that I wanted to do to be able to, except we were talking about all these these variations in the equation. In science, if you can't measure what you're doing, it's impossible to know what's working and what's not working.
Mm.
So one of the things was I wanted to calculate surface area so I could calculate the volume, the air volume. So the surface area of that instrument is actually the same as that instrument.
Oh, wow.
Which allowed me to then start to really hone in on the three main things that you hear from an acoustic guitar. And it's not until you start to look at a lot of data and quite nerdy stuff that the first thing you're looking at is the air response, the air frequency, the top frequency, and in some guitars, and certainly in mine, is the back frequency. So we all talk about woods like Brazilian rosewood and East Indian rosewood and mahogany, and how does it... there's certain things that you need to do in your back bracing to make the back plate, and I refer to them as plates because they're vibrate sympathetically to the top plate. So sort of think about it like the Gold Coast Seaway, and you've got an outgoing tide and an incoming swell. If the two of those waves meet at exactly the right time, you get a doubling in amplitude, and we've all seen those waves go boom and they explode up. If they don't, they go and they cancel each other out. So that's what you don't want in acoustic guitars. And if you sort of mess up that relationship between back frequency and top frequency, the thickness of your sides, the mass, we're trying to eliminate dampening. There's a whole range of stuff that's all coupled into that. But well spotted about the sound. The sound hole's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, a Dreadnought being the big thunderbox that it is, which most of us know, you know, people, guitar shapes sort of loosely fall into these zones. If we see a cowboy, sort of chord player, 3 chords, whacking, acoustic guitar, awesome, love that stuff. Dreadnoughts, great guitars for that. Having a sort of more square sort of waist. This guitar I sort of refer to as more of an all-rounder, so the one you played, slightly tighter in the waist, you'll get a little bit more focus. Still got a nice bottom end, but fingerstyle players will gravitate a little bit more towards that simply because of the fidelity they can get out of it, whereas Dreadnoughts can be lost. And then I do one underneath that, which is the same shape, but just plan shape smaller, called an auditorium. And that just came from my love affair with all the early sort of vintage Martins and things like that, and looking at them going, man, these guitars, are great, but I want to make my own version of them. And so I had to really understand what made them great.
Yeah.
The players that made them great. And I think that's a really important thing too, that we never really talk about. So, like, my job's to make great instruments, and that's stable, they sound perfect, they do all, perfect's a probably a word we shouldn't use, but they sound a certain way, but it's players that make them great.
Yeah.
It's players that make them iconic.
And every player has a different attack.
Yeah, I mean,
different.
You mentioned Jimmy Page before, and Tom Petty on a Telecaster. I mean, Jimi Hendrix on a Stratocaster. Like, all these iconic players took what was somebody's idea and somebody's set of choices and their interpretation of what an instrument should be or could be, and then it was the players that made it great. And we're on that journey now, and I often get asked, "Oh, who's famous? Who plays your guitars?" And we've certainly got some of those people. I actually got sent a shot the other day of Billy Gibbons with one of my guitars at the Grand Opry, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Because I was, who's not a ZZ Top fan? But
there's some really hot local players that are playing your guitars.
And this is
Jace McShred,
Kyle Lionheart.
Daniel Cox played this the other day.
Yeah, he's been doing some stuff on this with the Filthy Animals. Dan was one of my students. He built a guitar with me. Oh,
he's a lovely guy. What
awesome
monster
guy.
Player.
Incredible player. And this is sort of where I was going to. I love talking about the people that aren't famous because I meet so many amazing players.
You were saying you meet a lot of bedroom players who are phenomenal.
Unbelievably talented, like freakishly good, but they've never had the desire to play live, or they don't, for them it's too daunting to do it, or whatever it is. But I think it's a great story for a music store to tell someone, hey, we've sold some guitars now to Casey Chambers, and I went and watched her at Twin Towns, last month or whenever it was before she headed over to the US. Like, it's a really nice thing, and Casey's an amazing artist. We got to meet her, and beautiful human being, beautiful lady. They're nice to tell people too, because it does give credibility to your guitars.
Yeah.
But it's not the whole story. The whole story is the up-and-coming artists, the people that save their money to buy a beautiful handmade guitar. Like, we don't think we've certainly met famous people. We've supplied and built guitars for famous people. But I'm excited about the ones that we haven't met and the ones that are still... doing a John Mayer, they're in their 5-year bedroom phase and they're just going to come out an absolute monster.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it on a Fenech guitar, and they've really found the love affair through one of my instruments. So,
man, I've got to get myself one.
You do.
I've got to save up.
Yeah.
I might have to sell a couple.
Well, I've had a look at your guitars. You've got quite a few.
I've got to sell a couple.
Yeah. In fact, I think probably what I said was you've got a problem like the rest of us.
I do have to sell a couple.
So it's been a journey. These are coming back. We stopped.
I really like it.
We stopped for a number of years, and I'm just getting more and more requests.
Well, I say the first time I'd seen, and I didn't know that you made electrics, and the first time that I'd seen one was I had Jace McShred in here.
Yeah.
And he's playing one, and it sounded great.
Yeah, he's got two. In fact, I made him one because he fell in love with one, and then I made this triple pickup one for myself, and he walked into the shop because he was coming to pick up one of his acoustic guitars. And he's like, oh, mate, I've got to have that. He was going out on the road with Adam Brand's band. And I'm like, oh, really? But I've really made this one for myself. So, we kind of still laugh about that. That's a killer one. That's got a tremolo on that one as well. But, Jace is one of those guys. He comes and does, I've been really blessed to meet Jason. He not only plays my guitars, he comes and does our clinics. We've flown him all around the place. He's always willing to just go, oh, Jace, can you come in and do some guitar samples for me? Yeah, mate, I'm there in a second. Scotty French, another local guy who owns Love Street Studios. He bought one of my very, very first acoustic guitars. In fact, we were in there, my band was in there recording our EP, and I just took down this, I think it was made of Blackheart sassafras, this thing I was so proud of, and I'm just sort of working on some vocal harmonies and stuff, and then I noticed Scotty was just walking around the control room playing it. And then I got a text message about when the bill was due, and he's like, hey, any chance you want to swap that guitar for what you owe me for? Then I was like, are you kidding me? And we've been great mates ever since. Yeah. Scotty's done recorded a lot of my early guitars through studios, and it gave me an early insight as to how they were recording through really great quality microphones. He's just been... So there's been all these people along the way that have sort of helped.
Yeah.
And continue to help too, which is, we're still in our infancy, but it's pretty exciting where we're heading.
Man, it's really incredibly cool to see wonderful, amazing instruments being made locally here on the Gold Coast.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
And going all out around the world for... other people, like say Billy Gibbons is playing one in the old Opry.
Yeah,
that's just awesome.
We've just picked up a UK distributor now, so we've got some guitars. We've been in the UK for some time, hoping to get to. We're in America, hoping to get to Asia this year sometime.
I guess that brings us to coming round to the end of things for us. But one thing we haven't talked about is, and you say you're pretty happy with the size you are now. What's the 5-year to 10-year plan?
Yeah, we get asked this a lot, particularly by people that are looking to either distribute our guitars or... we certainly want to grow, but we want to grow the right way. And I know lots of companies talk about this, but the beauty about being still owning the company, still hands-on, I'm still covered in sawdust every day. My wife's a part of the whole business as well, is that we know we want to grow. We're really, really keen to train more local people. I'd like to be... a business where we can take people from the music industry who are really passionate, who want to try their hand at guitar making and make a career for them. And I get like a huge kick out of even that part, that we've been able to contribute to other people's lives through building these beautiful things. I mean, these things, if they're cared for, will be around for hundreds of years. Yeah. So it's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Look, I think we can easily scale up to probably triple what we're doing, which sounds quite scary, but we've been on that trajectory before. And then, the whole COVID mess really sort of changed things around. But we'll get there again, I think.
Quickly, when COVID happened, how did that affect you? I would imagine, I can imagine that one of the big effects, and this has affected everyone that was building anything, was the cost of materials would have gone up significantly.
That was one of the factors. We organised our launch for 2020. So we had all this stock ready to go. We'd already been working with a couple of stores. I had one in Brisbane, one on the Sunshine Coast. We had stores around the country that, were starting to get introduced to the idea that we were coming. They'd seen my guitars and still lots of people have never heard of my guitars as well. But at that point, it was all very new. We just got out of LAX and they closed the airport 2 weeks later, and we stood our staff down. It was a whole, are we going to make it through this period? The good thing about the way we purchase materials for the guitar industry is you are purchasing so far ahead. So we were able to kind of weather the storm, so to speak. Keep concentrate. I had some custom orders which sort of carried me through, had a lot of people just reach out. And of course, what none of us could have anticipated is that the guitar industry, it's still the highest.
It sort of boomed.
It's the highest sales ever recorded was through COVID. And it really almost kind of helped us kickstart a little bit because people couldn't get instruments.
There was a lot of things that happened for people going online. Was that something that increased for you too? Did you find that you discovered an online community, or were you selling things online, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, not really. So we were selling direct, we were online, and then I got schooled fairly quickly that when you start to sell through music stores and retailers, that certainly back then it was not a very sort of... They don't want me selling direct, and it was quite frowned upon. It was something that I've personally never really quite grappled with, because the strength of my brand is through the community that I've been able to sort of develop and grow. And we've got people now that own 8, 9 Fenech guitars, and they're collecting master builts and this type of thing. But we did it for a while, but we've actually only, as of about 6-8 weeks ago, turned back on going direct. So
I guess it's a weird thing, because I do remember there was a point where if you wanted to buy a Fender guitar, you had to buy it from Fender Australia. And only, I don't know how long they've been doing it for, but Fender now sells stuff direct, which is odd that you would compete with stores that are selling your product.
Yeah, look, I think it's we could probably have a whole separate podcast on this whole thing.
It's just an interesting thing from a business point of view.
Yeah, and it is interesting. It's interesting for me because we find that small boutique companies like us, and we really looked over to America. Well, what are these smaller companies like, and we've spoken about some of them tonight, that are building 300 to 500 guitars a year. They've got really great, strong relationships with retailers. But the minute you start to move to another country, you've got to go through this distributor, which ultimately just makes your instruments so much more expensive.
Yeah, because everyone's adding a percentage on top.
Everybody's adding a percentage. And what the part I never understood was we just sell it full retail. So I don't really compete with anybody.
Yeah, so people aren't getting it any cheaper by coming to you.
No. But what they are getting is a connection to us, our workshop, to me personally. People still freak out that they're speaking to me on the phone on the weekend. My number's still on the website, and I prefer it that way because I can have a conversation with a guy who says, hey, I like playing Creedence covers and I own a D18 and a D28 and I love those guitars. I'm like, cool, I love them too. They're great. Would you like to know what would complement them out of my range? And so if anything, it's sort of, I don't really want to lose that. I want to hang on to that for as long as I possibly can, because those ties to musicians are what keeps me hungry to keep going. It
also informs you of what people are looking for too, I guess, and what they're out there doing, and keeps you in touch with.
And we're lucky. We've got great retailers. We've lost some over the years that haven't made it through the COVID sort of woes. Music stores are closing. It's getting harder and harder for those guys to compete. What has hurt is when some of those bigger companies, American companies, have started selling direct, but they're undercutting the dealers. and that's something that we would never do. We don't need to do. Our guitars are, we've got people waiting for them as it is. So, but it is a shift in the market now. A lot of people are. 5 years ago, the thought of buying an acoustic guitar, I would have thought online an expensive thing. I would never have done it.
No, it's one of those things that I've always, and I have bought a couple of guitars online, but it almost always is one of those things where you want to hold the instrument. You want to be able to go and feel it and go, okay, that one, I really like the feel, because they are such individual, unique things.
Yeah, they are. What has happened though, and I watch this trend quite closely, as anybody does in business, you're watching, it's not necessarily about how you go about making more money. I mean, if you want to make lots of money, don't get into guitar making, but I watch it for the customer interaction. And now people are buying my guitars online, and they're happy to.
A lot of things have gone online.
Consumer behaviour's changed. There's a lot more information out there now. We've started marketing, which has really helped tell our brand story and our story to players. I still get comments every day. I've just come across your guitars. I've never heard of them before. I feel like I should have known about them. You've been around for, over a decade, and it's like, well, that's cool.
And it still helps for stores, particularly bricks and mortar stores, to have the stuff in stock, because someone could walk in, pick up a guitar and go, I just love this.
Well, here's an interesting thing.
And never make the connection any other way.
That's exactly right. And we think that we're stronger by doing a mixed model. And this is the new trend, I think, that you're going to see in the music industry. You're going to see most products being offered directly from the maker or the company themselves, but which is fine. Some people will just go, well, I've seen my mate down the road play one and I know what it sounds like and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to go and buy that thing, which probably works for a pedal or something like that. But an acoustic guitar and electric guitar, you're probably still going to want to go into a store. So we're actually seeing that our sales through stores are increasing because we've started to promote online ourselves. And that was always my intent, was for the people that
it's just
only
increasing brand awareness.
That's all it is, and it's a genuine thing for the people that only want to deal with me and see value in doing that, or deal with one of the other guys at the shop. I now have people regularly fly interstate. Flights to the Gold Coast are pretty cheap, and they just tell me, "Hey, I'm coming up. Can I come and try some guitars?" I'm like, "Sure," and they'll fly in, and we give them a bit of a workshop tour and walk them around. Most of my master-built customers now fly up to pick and choose their timbers. That's a whole separate process that sort of blocks out a 4-hour thing, and that's a really, really special thing, which I just, I love doing, absolutely love doing. And then they fly back up to collect them, and then, we're sitting around and we're playing. And so that part, I think, only drives consumer behaviour to go, yeah, I just watched that thing, and I've watched this podcast, and I've watched this, and I'm in Melbourne, and then the next minute they're on our dealer page going, where can I go and try one in Melbourne? And then I'll walk into Coleman's Guitars, or Coleman's Music and Sky Music, or A&B Music at Geelong, and they've got a full, and then they're going, hey man, we're selling a lot of your guitars now. So it is a full circle thing. Yeah. It's just a change in consumer behaviour, and I think people are just a little bit more comfortable now with handing over dollars over the internet.
I will put links down below in the description for Fenech Guitars and all the things that Aaron's up to. And thank you very, very much, Aaron, for spending some time with me this evening. My pleasure. Yeah, it's been great. I'm really looking forward to... I'm going to come down to the shop and have a look myself. I've never been down to the... Yeah. I'm going to come and have a look. Yeah. Take some video footage and add it to the podcast. Yeah, well, you should. And there's lots of timber, and you'll be intoxicated by the smell of some of these woods. I'll probably end up spending money. But anyway, that's okay. That's okay. You can't take it with you when you go. That's true. Yeah. No, thanks very much for having me. I'm excited. Yep. So should you. Anyway. Awesome. Thanks, mate. Thank you very much. All right. That's us. That's done. Beautiful.